Hello everybody, welcome to our presentation. Together with my colleagues Chris and Arjen, we will talk to you about network structures today, in which we will discuss two papers. First, Chris is going to talk to you about the Dyer and Nobeoka article about creating and managing in a high-performance knowledge-sharing network. And second, Arjen is going to explain the Wilhelm article about managing co-opetition through horizontal supply chain relations. At the end of our presentation, we will conclude both articles and answer our research question. What is the role of network structures for creating cooperation and competition among suppliers? During the presentation, we will keep this question in mind. But first, Chris is going to talk to you about the Dyer and Nobeoka article.
So I will be taking you to the Dyer and Nobeoka paper, which focuses on learning as a result of networks working together. They focused on Toyota because it's the largest and best managed Japanese company, and because it has shown a steady increase of labor productivity in contrast to their US competitors. Finally, the automotive industry is the key example for a supplier network, as we've previously discussed during the lectures. But when we talk about sharing knowledge, we need to distinguish between explicit and tacit knowledge. Explicit knowledge is knowledge that is easily codifiable and transmitted, for example, facts. Whereas tacit knowledge is implicit, infinitely more complex, but also leads to more sustainable advantages. For example, an expert who has all sorts of knowledge about a certain buyer network because he has spent a long time acquiring all that knowledge. However, as you can probably also imagine, it is very difficult to share this information. However, Toyota has found a way through their knowledge sharing network. But when you create a network like that, you mainly run into three common dilemmas. First is, how do you motivate those who are self-interested and don't want to put information in because they fear that they might lose their competitive edge, which they value so much? Finally, how do you discourage those that only get stuff out of the program but don't put anything into it, so free riders? And finally, how do you maximize the efficiency of knowledge transfers when so many individuals are involved in this whole process? Well, Toyota found a way through their 4 knowledge-sharing routines. The first one is inter-firm employee transfers. These are the 120 to 140 employees that Toyota transfers from firm to firm. That way, expert knowledge gets shared on a very personal basis, and they are allowed to work in a certain company either for a period of time or indefinitely. Then you have the supplier association. And this is basically Toyota and all its suppliers in one association. And the focus of that association is they wanted to foster information exchange between the member companies and Toyota, foster mutual development and training, and organize socializing events. And within this association, you have 2 large committees. The topic committee, which is more tasked with sharing explicit knowledge about, for example, rules and guidelines, and the quality committee, which is more focused on, hey, how do we improve the quality of this product? So it's more focused on tacit knowledge. Suppliers themselves get to decide on what project the committee will work with, and the committee works with the suppliers when they want to achieve that goal. So there's a lot of interchangeable working. The next resides within Toyota themselves, which is the Operations Management Consulting Division. This division exists of highly experienced members who are able to offer on-site free help on both emergent and concrete problems. So if you run in as a supplier, you run into a problem you don't know how to solve, you approach Toyota and they send out experts who can help you for basically free because it's one of the benefits of joining the program. Finally, you have the voluntary learning teams. And in this case, suppliers are grouped based on proximity, competition, and experience with Toyota. And then they decide upon a common goal. For example, increase the productivity in a certain area of interest. And these groups are reorganized every 3 years in order to prevent stagnation. So all in all, these 4 knowledge-sharing routines have a lot of effects. Basically, they create a shared identity. They create norms of reciprocal knowledge sharing, and if you don't want to share knowledge or if you're not actively involved with that, Toyota is within their rights to fine you. And there is a lot of tacit knowledge sharing because of a lot of people transferring from different organizations to different organizations. Also, there's no proprietary knowledge, so when you enter this association, your knowledge becomes Toyota's knowledge, and the benefits are for the supplier, although Toyota expects you to return the investment over time. And finally, we have this model where you can see at what certain level what routine works and what knowledge it brings into the mix. You can pause the video here while we will go on towards the second paper.
Where the paper of Dyer and Nobeoka mainly focus on the cooperation between buyers and suppliers in a network. The paper of Mrs. Wilhelm also incorporates the competition between suppliers in a strategic network. This together is called co-opetition, which is the tension between cooperation and competition. As a practical example, this can be a sharing of information to become better, but on the other hand, try to become the best supplier in a network of the buyer. The theoretical background of the paper. The paper distinguishes two types of supply chains or supply networks. Supply chains are seen as connected strings of organizations involved in production and supply of particular goods. So this mostly can be seen as a buyer-supplier diet, where supply networks are more comprehensive and they incorporate sets of other organizations, and they try to become a more or less a learning network. Then we have a strategic network, and this is a network that is led by a hub firm, and this hub firm has more authority to extend power, to determine the market strategy, and to select network partners. A strategic network can be seen as the network of, for example, Toyota. Then the unit of analysis. This paper has two views. First is the buyer-supplier diet. This is the relationship between, for example, supplier C and the buyer. And then the paper also has a horizontal supply chain relationship, and this is, for example, the relation between supplier B and supplier C. Then the paper states that social embeddedness is the result of repeated interaction between two firms or more firms, and hereby these interactions, for instance between supplier A and supplier B, may affect the relation between supplier B and supplier C. Then the results of this paper. In the discussions we can find three propositions. The first proposition is about that because of regular meetings there are strong connections created between the customer and the supplier. However, there are also loose ties created between rivals, and because of these loose ties, rivals are no longer faceless of each other, and they can monitor each other, and this will enhance the competition. Proposition 2 is that Toyota or other strategic networks work with process-oriented developments. And this is very valuable information for Toyota, but they can also use it to stimulate competition in the supply chain. The last proposition is that suppliers can also increase the competition through learning groups, because they meet each other and therefore they will see each other's strengths and weaknesses, which will also increase the competition. And because the competition is higher than in normal markets, this competition is called capability building competition, and this is possibly a higher form of competition because the rivals know more about each other than in normal markets.
So, thank you, Arjen. For now, we come to the conclusion about the two papers. As previously explained, the Dyer and Nobeoka article argues that networks are crucial for creating more knowledge because of greater diversity. With as a pitfall, a network needs effective coordination in order to cost less money. These pitfalls were protection of proprietary knowledge, the collective action or free rider problem, and efficiency problems with a big network. And Toyota handles these problems creatively and manages network level knowledge sharing processes by creating a shared identity. It is important to note that the level of analysis of this article was at the buyer-supplier network. On the other hand, the Wilhelm article builds on the article of Dyer and Nobeoka and adds to them that the networks do not only function for cooperation, but also increases the competition between supplier relationships. This tension was called co-opetition. Wilhelm argues that customers, or buyers, need to acknowledge that customers play a very important role in influencing horizontal supply chains. If managed effectively, customers can practice a great influence on their supplier network. If they do not actively influence these supplier networks, they can lose control over them. The level of analysis in this paper was both buyer-supplier and supplier-supplier. So then we get to what is shared, what deviates, and what does the article add to the other. What both articles share is that the coordination is crucial in controlling network relationships. And in both papers, they emphasize that the buyer plays a significant role in determining roles, network roles, and amount of transparency. The difference is that the Wilhelm article explains that transparency also provokes more competition and elaborates transparency on a deeper level than the Dyer and Nobeoka. Even more, Wilhelm adds to the article with supplier-supplier relationships for further development of whole networks in the future. Then, back to our main question. What is the role of network structure for creating cooperation and competition among suppliers? The role of the network structure is essential for creating both cooperation and competition. The structure can also act as a negotiator between buyers and suppliers, and the amount of transparency determines whether knowledge can be shared effectively and also determines whether suppliers perceive the amount of competition within their network. It determines the degree of co-opetition. Therefore, the role of structure is determined by its initiator, which is the buyer. Well, this was the end of our presentation. We hope we have clarified things for you, and we will see you Thursday. Bye!